like I used to refer to this book a lot in my earlier writing tips and tricks videos, but I'm just now getting around to actually reviewing it, because this is a book you have to brace yourself for. Let's talk about the thing that made me cry the hardest this month, Far from the Tree by Robin Benway. Far from the Tree follows Grace, Maya, and Joaquin, who are all siblings who were placed up for adoption. Maya and Grace were both adopted by different families, while Joaquin spent his whole life in foster care. The story follows them as they discover one another, get in contact, and deal with other problems, like Maya's parents separating, Joaquin's foster parents wanting to adopt him, and Grace getting pregnant at 16. Hey! I interrupt this video to tell you about my book, Phantoms of the Inferno, an epic high fantasy with espionage, evil kings, mass extinction events, and shady magical conspiracies. If that sounds interesting, go read Phantoms of the Inferno on Scribblehub and Wattpad. Book 1 is up, and keep an eye out for announcements because Book 2 will start uploading later this year. And Grace's pregnancy is actually where the story starts. The first chapter starts by talking about how Grace discovered she was pregnant, how her boyfriend split as soon as she found out, and how she decided to put the baby, whose name is Millie, but she nicknamed Peach, up for adoption. Then after Grace gives up Peach, she's in a really emotionally bad place, missing her baby and heartbroken over her boyfriend leaving when she was most vulnerable. So after a few weeks in bed, she decides she wants to find her biological mom to try and find someone who understands her pain. And in the end, Grace has a lot of trouble finding her biological mom, but her parents do explain that she has two siblings, Maya and Joaquin, and that Grace and Maya's parents had an agreement to let the girls contact each other whenever one of them was ready, so it's easy for Grace to reach out to Maya and meet her.
We had a plan! We had a plan!
Then when the two of them do meet, they decide to reach out to Joaquin, who Grace managed to track down, and that's something that really surprised me, how fast and easily Grace was able to find her siblings. I feel like in a lot of stories of finding biological families, the search is the main focus. Then when they do find each other, it's a big reunion and happy ending, so it was interesting seeing what happens after the big meeting and seeing how the characters navigate these new relationships with the other drama going on in their lives.
I'm so tense!
And the next drama we're introduced to is Maya's, because the chapters alternate who the narrator is, and that was very fun, but made it hard to split up this video because the chapters were named after the character that narrated them, and don't have numbers. And I also need to put this disclaimer that a lot of the drama I'm going to talk about with these characters happened across several chapters, but the easiest way for me to explain this book is by explaining everyone's drama all at once, then move on to the next person's drama, even though it was all much more interwoven, and that's why you should go read the book.
I'm reading. No way!
Anyway, Maya's drama is that her parents' marriage is falling apart, and the biggest reason for that is because her mom is an alcoholic. Her mom drinks wine throughout the day, and then when she's drunk or buzzed, she picks a fight with her husband, so they end up screaming at each other every evening. And the big elephant in the room, obligatory elephant, this one has a plant, that's consuming Maya's life. But she also has other issues, like normal drama with her girlfriend and the fact that after they adopted her, Maya's parents managed to get pregnant. So now she has a sister who Maya loves, but it's hard for Maya being the only person in her family who looks different and feels like the odd one out.
You're different, and I don't like you!
And I do need to say, Maya and Grace are both white, Joaquin is Latino, and race is a thing that comes up in the book and is talked about, and it is something I will come back to later, because race and how a person looks are big things to consider when writing adoption stories.
Adopted?
Then after Maya's chapters, we're introduced to Joaquin. We started off by finding out about his past homes, how some were good, some were bad, why he left certain homes, and how his current foster family is great, and they want to adopt him. But after 17 years in a really brutal system, Joaquin isn't sure he wants to be adopted. It feels like another promise that people will break. But he is willing to meet Grace and Maya, and the three of them get along fairly well and start bonding over their similarities. And right away, Grace brings up finding their bio mom, and Maya and Joaquin both say they're not interested, and both hold resentment about her giving them up. So Grace decides not to tell them about Peach. chapters are where all the drama builds up and eventually falls apart. It starts with Grace returning to school for the first time since giving birth, and it's hard and weird, but she manages to make it all the way to third period. Then in third period, Grace ends up sitting next to her ex-boyfriend, baby daddy person Max, and his friend Adam. And Max is a coward, and Adam is a jerk who plays a sound of a baby crying on his phone, and that triggers Grace, so she punches him. And it was so satisfying seeing a bully get punched, but also frustrating because Adam did not learn his lesson. You just know Adam is one of those guys who will get punched many times in his life, and it will never be for anything he's done.
Punch him in the face.
Then after Grace punches Adam, she runs off to cry and ends up beating Raphael, a new student who it turns out works at the kitchen supply store Grace's mom likes. So over the next few weeks, Grace gets in the habit of visiting Raphael at work and becomes friends with him. And in these weeks, she also gets her first updates on Millie, since she chose to have an open adoption. So she'll get updates from Millie's family and get to visit her a few times a year. And that's hard for Grace, and it ends up coming to a head when one of her neighbors sees Grace out with Raphael and tells her parents. And when Grace's parents confront her about it and are nervous about her spending time with a boy, she blows up on them and finally just talks about how angry she is at Max and her parents, how sad she is for Millie and her biological mom, and all the other feelings that have been building up. But Grace's family just isn't used to expressing, so they decide to go to therapy.
Therapy!
Meanwhile, at Maya's house, she and her sister Lauren are given the news that her parents are separating and her dad moves out that weekend. And this leads to a fight between Maya and her girlfriend Claire, partially because Maya's just angry and spiteful right now and not opening up to Claire in a conductive way, but also because Claire isn't really supporting Maya very well. It's not something I picked up on during my first read or is seen as a problem in the book, but Claire does a lot of, that sucks, but it could be worse to Maya, because Claire's parents are divorced and her dad isn't in the picture, so when Maya complains about her dad not living at home anymore, Claire says that sucks, but at least she can still talk to her dad. And it's a lot of comparing and minimalizing Maya's feelings, and Maya never realizes it, so it's not brought up at all as a problem. Instead, Maya thinks she's the problem and eventually breaks up with Claire.
I need a break.
And Maya ends up telling Grace and Joaquin about the breakup before she tells Lauren, which causes a fight between the two of them. But they're sisters. They yell, ignore each other for a few days, then make up and go to dinner. And while they're at dinner, their mom, who's drunk, manages to fall and hurt herself. So she's checked into rehab, and Maya and Lauren's dad moves back home.
And that endless driving back and forth,
And while all this is happening, Joaquin is having problems with his foster parents and his ex-girlfriend. His problem with his ex-girlfriend is that he broke up with her because he doesn't think he's good enough for her. She has baby pictures and a loving family, and he doesn't, and feels like because of that he'll ruin his ex-girlfriend Birdie's life if they stay together. But he still loves her, and she loves him, and is really hurt, and he still has to see her at school every day, which just causes drama. And Joaquin tells Grace and Maya about all this when Maya's telling him about her breakup, and he also tells his therapist about it.
Therapy!
As for Joaquin's family drama, that just revolves around him working up the courage to tell them he doesn't want to be adopted. And we learn part of the reason Joaquin doesn't want to be adopted is because he was already adopted once before. He actually has 2 failed adoptions. His first foster family almost adopted him, but then they got pregnant and only wanted 1 baby. And then when Joaquin was about 12, he was adopted by a different family. But while he was living there, he had nasty meltdowns, and one day during a meltdown, he was throwing stuff and threw a stapler that hit the family's biological toddler. So the foster dad freaked out, broke Joaquin's arm, and they returned him. So now Joaquin is scared that he's damaged and dangerous and will hurt his foster parents if they adopt him. And he ends up telling Grace and Maya about this after they meet up near Grace's house and they meet Adam, who calls Grace a slut, so Joaquin pins him to a wall. Then Joaquin gets freaked out and runs away, but Grace and Maya chase after him and comfort him and are sad he's had such a hard life.
Life goes on.
Then, after Joaquin goes home and tells his foster parents that he doesn't want to be adopted, which they respond to by buying him a car. And that's really difficult for Joaquin, and it's not made better when he meets with Grace and Maya again, and Maya steals Grace's phone, and they learn about Millie and Peach, and that ends up being a whole thing. But once Maya and Joaquin understand why Grace wants to find their biological mom, they're more on board with finding her. And Maya just so happens to have a letter her parents sent to the biological mom with her home address on it, so they decide to go find her. And now we're on to the chapters that had me sobbing. So these chapters start with Grace, Maya, and Joaquin all breaking under the pressure of waiting to go meet their birth mom and not being able to tell their parents. Grace ends up telling Raphael, who tells her she should tell her parents, but she doesn't. Maya calls Claire and tells her about the meetup, and they end up getting back together. Then Maya gets in a fight with Lauren because their mom's rehab facility is having family day and Maya doesn't want to go. Partially because she already plans to go meet her birth mother, and also because she's just angry at her mom and isn't ready to see her again. And Joaquin doesn't have anyone to talk to, but he does start pushing back and giving his foster parents a hard time until it all culminates in a big fight and Joaquin ends up running away.
I ran away.
Then Joaquin, Grace, and Maya drive up to the house from Maya's parents' letter, and this is where I started crying. As it turns out, their birth mother, Melissa, died a long time ago, but they end up meeting their aunt, Jessica. She brings them inside, gives them snacks, and tells them their story. They learn that Joaquin was named after his dad, and Joaquin Sr. and Melissa were high school sweethearts, but Joaquin Sr. and his family were deported before Joaquin Jr. was born. Then Melissa's parents kicked her out when they found out she was pregnant, and she managed to hold on to Joaquin for about a year, partially because she got pregnant with Grace, and Grace's adoptive parents paid Melissa's bills while she was pregnant. Then after Melissa gave birth, things got bad and Joaquin ended up being taken away. And then Melissa got pregnant with Maya, and Maya's birth father wasn't great for Melissa, and it was just a nasty cycle of setbacks and failures until Melissa was killed in a trucking accident.
The end.
And Melissa loved all her kids. She just couldn't take care of them. And one way she showed her love was by setting up and keeping a safe deposit box for Joaquin that he, Grace, and Maya discover is full of his baby pictures. And it's this whole big emotional scene that I can't get into or I'll start crying again. Then, after they leave Jessica's house, they go home where Joaquin's foster parents are waiting for him, and having their love and his baby pictures makes him feel alright to be adopted by them. Then Maya goes and sees her mom in rehab and tells her about her birth mom, and they start making amends, and Grace finds the strength to go visit Millie. There's a lot you can take away from this book to improve your writing. First and foremost, this is a great book when it comes to alternating points of view. It's really hard to write alternating narrators. You don't want them to sound identical, but you also can't make them too different because that's jarring for the readers. And you need to be careful where you change narrators so you don't confuse readers. But Robin Benway does it masterfully. The characters feel distinct in how they think and talk, all with different ways of viewing the world, but they're similar enough that changing narrators isn't confusing, and the chapters break makes it easy for consistent transitions. Another thing I want to talk about is how to write characters who are adopted, or being fostered, or are estranged in some way from their birth parents. This book did two things right. It used the right language, and it pointed out how adoption looks. So when you are writing a character who's adopted, typically you would call the people who gave birth to them their biological or birth parents, and the people raising them can be called their adoptive parents, but for the most part, unless they have a bad relationship, those are just their parents. The modifier is not usually added to the family they were raised in and hopefully know and love and get along with. And a lot of people will ask about their real families, which is not language adopted people or their families, biological or adopted, use or like. But knowing which characters would ask that and who would get the language wrong is good characterization and could set up good tension and conflict.
You're different, and I don't like you.
And then there's the language of abandon, give up, place, all the different ways people describe how they were separated from their birth families. For this, different people will use different terms, and it will say a lot about a character, how they feel about their birth family, what their situation with them is, what their current relationship with them is, depending on what language they use. So it's worth becoming familiar with adoption languages if you're writing anything, because a lot of times parents are a big hurdle to the plot happening, and an easy way to get rid of that hurdle is by killing them off.
The body's gone, huh?
Another thing to consider when writing adopted characters is their looks. Race is a tricky subject when it comes to adoption that a lot of people have big opinions on. Some people argue it's traumatic to remove a child from their culture, birthplace, and a place where they may look like everyone else in order for them to be adopted. There are arguments on whether or not children should be adopted by people of a different race, and some people argue that single parents or same-sex parents shouldn't be allowed to adopt. And the big argument against those is that what's most important is providing a child with a safe, stable, loving home. And if your book takes place in a fantasy world, there is an argument to be made about whether different fantasy creatures should be allowed to adopt other types of fantasy creatures. And I think most of those arguments have to come down to an individual level, because some people do adopt a child with the mindset of them being a cute accessory or toy, and them being different from a different country or a different race from the adopted parents is part of that cute appeal. Other people won't be able to get past the baggage all adoptive children have. Other people may adopt for good person points. Some people do it as a means to make money. There are a lot of wrong reasons to have a kid, both adopted and biological, but there are also a lot of good reasons, and exploring those reasons can help you understand your characters, their dynamics, their personalities, and their backstories better, and make them more interesting.
I'm a writer.
And the last bit I want to touch on is how to write tics, habits, and mannerisms, because this book explores them in a really interesting way. It talked a lot about how similar Grace, Maya, and Joaquin looked and some of their similarities, like how they all like mayonnaise, but it also explored little habits they had, starting off with focusing more on habits they shared, like shaking their legs when they're nervous. Then it pointed out more habits they shared with each other's families, like how Maya and Grace's mom both have insomnia. Then near the end of the book, it pointed out how they're similar to their families, like how Lauren also has insomnia like Maya, or how Grace chews her straws like her mom. These habits made the characters feel a lot more real, and they were an interesting exploration for all the ways they're similar and different, and help establish tension and distance they feel throughout the book.
You're different, and I don't like you.
And that's all I got. Far From the Tree is one of my favorite books. The characters are fun, the writing is amazing, and it's a really compelling, emotional story that I really, really like coming back to time and again. So go out and read Far From the Tree by Robin Benway.